Welcome to the second section of EasyPy 3, Learning the Basics. In this lesson, you will write your very first Python program. In the introduction, we spoke about how programs are a set of instructions. Well, in this lesson, you will learn how to instruct the computer to talk, and that's done through a function. Before we look at how to do that, let me explain what a function is. A function in Python is a code that is able to cause an effect, such as showing text on the screen, which you will learn in this lesson. A function can also calculate values. By that I mean it can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and many other things. Now, there are many functions in Python that can do both of these things together. So where do these functions come from? Well, they can be from Python itself, like the function we're about to use, or we can create some functions of our own, and you will learn how to do both of these things in this course. One of the functions from Python itself is the print function. Let's look at the following line of code. It starts with print, and then there's an open bracket or parenthesis, and a quote mark, and then it says hello world, and then there's a closing quote mark, and then there's a closing parenthesis or a bracket. The word print is the name of the function, and the brackets contain the argument of the function. Now, what do I mean by argument? Well, in this example, the argument is hello world, and that's inside quote marks.
Some functions don't need any argument, so the brackets are left empty.
Now, that's quite important that it's inside quote marks, because this is telling Python that you should take whatever's inside the quote marks literally. This type of data is known as a string. You will learn about the different types of data later on in the course, so don't worry too much about it. For now, let me show you how to write your first code. The first thing you want to do is locate where you've saved Python. If you're on Windows, you just want to click on the Start button and you want to scroll down to P, and you should see Python 3.8. And then you just want to click on the idle program, IDLE. This will load the Python shell. Now, what you want to do is you want to click on File, New File, and you want to make that full screen, or at least I do. And you want to write print, P-R-I-N-T. And you'll notice that the color changes to purple. That's because print is an inbuilt function. Next, you want to write the open bracket and then a quote mark, hello, comma, world, and exclamation mark, and a closing quote mark and a closing bracket. That's it, guys. You've written your first program. Now, it's a very basic program, but nonetheless, it's a program. Now, you want to go ahead and save it. So click File, Save As. You'll notice that it automatically tries to save it in the Python folder, but I'm going to go ahead and on desktop create a new folder. I'm going to call it Python, and we're just going to save it in there. I'm just going to call it hello world and save. Now notice it's saved as a .py file, and that's because that's the extension name for a Python file. Now, this is your very first source code, and the file that's saved is a source file. Now, if you want to run it, you click on Run and Run Module, or as it says over here, you can press F5. When you run it, it says Hello World. Simple as that. The Python shell can actually be used in another way. You see over here the blinking line over here. This is telling us that Python shell is actually ready to take a command from us, so we don't actually have to make a new file. So I could do the same thing right over here. I can write print hello world, and it prints it right here. Now, the only difference here is that we're not writing a script here. If I write anything on this shell, it will only print it here and we won't be able to save it. Whereas when we create a new file and save it, our code is saved. Another thing I want to show you is that if I write print with a capital P and try to run that, we get an error. And that's because Python is a case-sensitive language. The name print with a capital P is not found. Print with a lowercase p is an inbuilt function. And another way to make sure that you've typed a built-in function correctly is that it will always change color. Whereas if you write it with a capital P, it won't change color. The final thing I want to show you is that you can use a single quote mark as opposed to a double quote mark, and it will give you the same result. However, you need to make sure that you end and start with the same one. If I use a double quote mark and try to end with a single quote mark, it will give me an error. So keep that in mind. Now, if you did decide to stay online, let me just show you how you can do the same thing on the REPL website. If you go and click on Start Coding again, and you create a new REPL, and then on the left over here, you can write your code. So we're going to write print hello world and run that. Now you can do the same thing as the shell over here. So we can write print hello world and it does the same thing. Now, if you do plan on staying on REPL, I do suggest that you sign up using one of these, or you can just use your email to sign up. That way it won't be anonymous and you can keep a track of all your files. One good thing about the REPL Online is that it does complete things for you and makes life easier. So if I go ahead and delete that and write print, look, it comes up with all the different functions available. Now if I click open bracket, it ends the other bracket for me. If I do an open quote mark, it does the end quote mark for me. Whilst this is useful, I do not recommend this for beginners because it will put you into a bad habit and you won't check for mistakes. So like I said, I really recommend that you stay offline, but if you don't want to, that's fine. You can stay online and use a platform such as this. Okay, let's review the things you've learned so far. You've learned that you can use the print function to output things to the console, in our case, the shell. You've learned that the print function is an inbuilt function and it's case sensitive, so you have to make sure to use the lowercase p. And finally, you've learned that you can use single or double quotes, but you have to make sure if you're going to start with one, you end with the same one. That's it. You can go ahead and try writing other things. Try printing your name or other sentences. Keep practicing till you fully understand this function. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask.
See you in the next lesson.